This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Welcome all of you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation. My name is Maria Kądzielska-Koper, and this is a platform for free speech. We talk about community, values, and philosophy. We thank very much Polish National Foundation for making this podcast possible, and for this episode, the partnership is with Humane Philosophy. And I have here in the studio Dr. Mikołaj Sławkowski-Rode, also a founder of Humane Philosophy. Thank you very much for showing up here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
Well, you are a professor at the Warsaw University, but I also know that you are a visiting professor in Oxford. Am I correct?
A research fellow at Blackfriars Hall, and I also work on a project that's based at the theology faculty, funded by the John Templeton Foundation.
So what I wanted to basically say, you have two platforms or two communities where you experience or you teach and you experience the academia. One is Warsaw University, and the other thing is Oxford University. I would say two a little bit different, and especially in their approach, because the college in Oxford is, let's say, much more conservative. The Warsaw University is much more left-wing. So you have to be in sort
Depends on which college you're
Okay,
talking
of
about.
course. But then you have to experience sort of dualism in your way of thinking. But could you bring us back? Because, you're, as a come of nationality, you're Polish.
Yes.
But in this intellectual influence is somehow through British conservatism, and this we have to mention Sir Roger Scruton, who was the tutor of your PhD.
Yes, both my doctorate and my master's degree, in fact. I met him in
Lucky one,
Oxford.
lucky
yes,
you.
I know, definitely.
So how did you manage? How did you meet him?
Well, just to comment a little bit on my background, I would like to say that it's not just British conservatism or, just English language philosophy more broadly, but it's a bit of both. So I was, in a way, in my academic thinking and my academic work brought up, as it were, in the continental tradition, with an emphasis on Karl Marx's thought, in fact, and the sort of neo-Marxism that is characteristic of the 20th century. I had many extremely good teachers at the University of Warsaw, and I was convinced Marxist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, when I arrived in Oxford in 2007.
Oh, that's funny.
And one of my first tutors was Roger Scruton, and I had no idea who Roger Scruton was at that time.
It needed to be a shock.
Of course I didn't read Roger because I was steeped in Marxism and reading all those sources. I knew who Jerry Cohen was, for example.
But tell me please one thing. How was it possible that you actually, from this grey world of Poland in those times, managed to go to Oxford?
Let's not exaggerate the greyness. I thought it was quite cool that time. I thought it was, in a way, very vibrant and exciting to be doing philosophy.
Maybe even
in
less
Poland.
grey than right now, I would say.
Maybe that's in a way true. I think the sort of artificial colour that we see everywhere is a bit grey at bottom or just underneath the surface. Everything is exactly the same now, with the pretense of being extremely colourful and varied. Whereas then, I did really feel that we're doing something important and talking about things that really matter. And that's actually what always interested me, things that really matter. And I was slightly shocked when I appeared in Oxford, and a lot of the philosophy done there was what we call analytic philosophy, was very, very technical and focused on kind of insulated issues that are important for philosophers only. And I was very disappointed with that sort of thing. And in a way, Roger came to the rescue, and he brought back into what I recognized immediately to be a very serious philosophical framework, the thing that I really liked doing or being involved in Warsaw, which is, talking about things that really matter or things that are really important. The sort of things really that when you hear that someone is doing philosophy or what we normally expect philosophers to do is to engage with things that bother us, but we don't know how to answer or we don't know how to address. What is morality? Do we recognize goodness in the world or do we create goodness? Is goodness something there? And so forth and so on.
Well, absolutely, I understand what you're talking about, because me, after going through the curriculum which we have at the Warsaw University and drawing all the time and space worms and going deep into ontology, which had absolutely nothing to do with my everyday life and anyhow changed this, but I had those instincts that there is that somehow philosophy needs to meet with the existence of a human being here and now. And then I encountered, after of course falling in love totally in Plato and the last philosopher which I really like to read, then I encountered Roger Scruton's books, and I realized, oh wow, he's doing something real. I mean, first of all, he writes in a way that people outside from the academia can also understand. We discuss. He has a very serious way of thinking, but he doesn't put it in the language that it's extremely hard and heavy, and it expresses in a sharpness of thoughts the intuitions which I had in it, but I couldn't name them in the way he names them. And that's what brought me actually to sort of falling in love with this way of doing philosophy. But I've never had a chance to meet him personally. It was actually from you who's bringing people, some of the students outside of Warsaw Academia, and pushing them from the humane philosophy let's say, experience, either in Croatia and then later on in Skrodopia, that I had a chance to see that, okay, there are people who are doing it for real.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the most valuable and amazing things about Roger's writing is that, as you say, it's extremely accessible. It makes extremely difficult issues pellucid and understandable to people who don't necessarily have training in philosophy. And to many philosophers, to many professional philosophers, that seems like a cop-out. In order to be a respected member of the philosophical community, you have to use the jargon, you have to
write like Kant.
You have to write like Kant, you have to make it extremely heavy and dense, and you have to force people to spend a lot of time on understanding what exactly it is that you're saying before you can understand.
A derived from B, and this.
That's right, yes. So Roger would never do that. But that doesn't mean that writing in the way he writes is easy. I think, in a way, it's much harder to write like this. And Roger was very prolific. But that doesn't mean writing came very easy to him. He spent quite a lot of time writing, even short pieces. An example of this is, of course, his contribution to the book I edited on the theme of mourning, where he contributed the final essay, I believe, that he wrote on the theme of mourning, and which he took about 2 years to polish from the time that he started writing it. In fact, he first delivered a paper at a Humane Philosophy Society seminar in 2016 that about half of the speakers that contributed to the volume were invited to, and he wrote a talk for that purpose. And about a year and a half later, when I started gathering other contributions and told him I'd like to put a volume together, he said, well, I'll have to rewrite it, of course. And then from that moment, it took him 2 years to sort of go over the piece enough times to have it ready for publication. So writing in that very accessible way can be much harder to achieve than just sort of reeling off the standard formulas that are coined in philosophy to mean this or mean that. So it's very hard to write like that.
I absolutely agree, but and that's what actually is so charming about those books as well, that on some levels you can read it to people outside of academia, to your friends in a coffee shop, but with other, when you sit down and see, okay, this comes from here and this is what the real meaning and the depths of it, that's charming, and that makes him, I would say, inspiring for new generations. And I do hope through this video podcast, Common Sense Generation as well, to make his thoughts alive. But you make his thoughts alive, but not only his, but sort of this way of doing philosophy through the humane philosophy. Tell us a few words for this, because I would say this is also something for young people, for new students who can sort of use it as a form of trampoline of getting away and making international, going into international academic world without enrolling up into Oxford or Cambridge, but having the same experience. This is Common Sense Generation. If you like this channel, please subscribe, share, and comment. Your voice really matters. A few words. What is humane philosophy? What you do and how to take part in
So
it?
the Humane Philosophy Society was established by myself and my two great friends from Oxford University, Ralph Weir and Samuel Hughes, in 2012, and we ran our first event in 2013, and that was a little conference at Oxford, being a human being, being a person. We didn't have any budget to record it professionally, so there's just a voice recording on one of our phones, I think, that we've got still online. But it has grown with funding from the University of Warsaw, the John Templeton Foundation, Blackfriars Hall, from the Ian Ramsey Centre at Oxford, as well as the American Catholic Philosophical Association, and some partners elsewhere like Zagreb University and the University of Bochum, all contributed to running various events and workshops, conferences, and summer schools. The project, or the society, takes its name from John Cottingham's essay, What is Humane Philosophy and Why It Is at Risk? You can read that essay on John Cottingham's webpage, and there he argues that in philosophy, with it becoming more and more specialized, he's thinking mainly of analytic philosophy in the Anglosphere, but he thinks that in that context, philosophy is becoming over-specialized and shies away from questions that are too big or, too vague for philosophers to address. And he thinks that's the wrong way to go for philosophy. He thinks philosophy, of course, shouldn't lose rigor and clarity of thought. And, it has its applications in more detailed contexts. But at the same time, it misses its calling if it doesn't address these very deep issues that we all want answers to, or at least sort of, illuminating perspectives about. And this is because there's no other discipline that can address these questions. We won't get answers, from science about what the meaning of life is and why meaning in life might matter, which is a provocative question. It's one of the topics John Cottingham himself is interested in.
When I was thinking about it, sort of thinking about this platform as well, and not only about philosophy, but what is the closest to philosophy, and then I realized it's actually poetry or literature. Then people who combine closest to what philosophers do, let's say, will be probably poets and authors when it comes to literature. So that's what I thought. We're like not even what the closest would be, and even the best philosophers are in fact very often sort of poets, let's say.
I completely agree. Definitely so. I think one of the things that we do very seriously with various things that we engage with in the Humane Philosophy Society is treating literature and poetry seriously as a source of insight into these deep questions. That's something we very much want to encourage. And so we've got two wings, as it were, or two horns, if you want to sound more feisty, of the Humane Philosophy Society. One is the Humane Philosophy Project, the initial idea of having a series of events, a standing seminar in Oxford and Warsaw, as well as complementary events in other locations, and an annual workshop and conference in the summer in Croatia that you attended.
Absolutely, it was an amazing experience, a lot of fun, but also I would remember especially out of a wonderful lecture about architecture, which was done by Alexander Stoddard.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And I was absolutely gobsmacked with this one.
He's a fantastic speaker and a great friend as well. He's also contributed, as you know, a paper to the volume on mourning on the Glasgow necropolis.
But also the fact that you bring we had this experience, except I would say normal students, then you have the novice, so people in the beginning of becoming Dominicans.
Oh,
so,
yes, the novitiates, that's right.
Novitiates, that's what word which I missed. And the fact that we had this visiting together, going around together, drinking together, talking philosophy together. I found that, in fact, they are very often much more lost than we are as students of philosophy, but, well, let's not say it aloud. But a wonderful experience. I do hope it will going to thrive, and a lot of young students are going to just take as much as they can out of it, because this is how philosophy should be done. Let's say.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's what we try to do. We try to just provide the right setting for philosophy to grow, as it were. As my mentor in Oxford and current boss, Andrew Pinsent, says, conferences are gardens and not machines, just like universities should be.
Which is very machinery right now.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree. We're thinking very instrumentally about education, sort of, like a function. We put one thing in on the one end, and then through a series of permutations that we need to tweak very carefully in order to get the right result, we get the outcome at the end. Whereas I've come to believe that it shouldn't be like that at all. It should be like a garden. You create the right environment, and then what grows, grows.
A bit true. Of course, certain discipline is always necessary, because it's very hard to to write something at the end. But those people who don't write, and they just don't get published.
Oh yes, but that's all self-discipline, I think. It's not something that we need or should need to enforce, top down.
Well, I hope that my tutor is not listening to this video podcast, because then she would be finished the PhD essay which you have, which is of course the case of self-discipline. But coming back to self-discipline, you definitely the form of self-discipline is the book The Meaning of Mourning, which you managed to put all the very different authors together, including yourself, but many others, in a very dense, and I would say various book, which is a new one, and you can take it out if you to make it too visible to our viewers. As I understand, it's you can buy it online and to read it. It's in English as well. The Meaning of Mourning, and edited by you, but with, let's say, 15 other authors?
15 essays in total, so 14 contributors apart from myself.
Absolutely. And also, I would say, very humane philosophy topic, because we all face the element of mourning, of passing, and getting and forgetting the loved ones which we have. And so start with the idea of this. First of all, one thing, could you, before we touch the topic and your essay in this, and the idea, is how did you pick up the authors and the contributors to this book?
Well, as I mentioned, it all started with a small day colloquium on that theme. It was called The Meaning of Mourning and took place at Blackfriars in 2016. And I think 6 of the 15 contributors were present there. Roger was supposed to contribute on the day, but unfortunately he was out hunting in the morning at 5 a.m. This was an afternoon colloquium, so he was hoping to drive down to Oxford. But unfortunately he fell off his horse, and the horse rolled over him.
This is the famous story.
That's right. This was in the morning before he was supposed to speak at the colloquium, and the horse fortunately didn't do more damage than break his leg. But the breaking of Roger's leg, of course, was prohibitive of him coming to speak at the colloquium. But others were there. Raymond Tallis was there, and Leslie Chamberlain, and Anthony O'Hare, and John Cottingham, and
those who are not doing horse riding. So often.
All those who weren't doing horse riding in the morning. That's right. And the idea for the colloquium came from doing a little bit of reading. First of all, I think on sentimentality and kitsch, and there's quite a lot of sentimentality and kitsch in how mourning is being expressed currently, I think.
I would say, but even going back to the most famous book, poems of mourning in Polish tradition, which is, of course, Kochanowski and his trance, which are the element of kitsch as well, as we know from history that he wrote so many things about Ursula, his daughter,
that's right.
But then the other daughter died, and there was like almost nothing about this. So it's definitely about him more than her. But this is all the topics which you address in this book as well.
Yes, so I began wondering at some point, why is it that mourning is so prone to being kitschified and being made, sentimental and unserious only for show. And it seemed to me, and it still does seem to me, that it is because it's a costly process. It requires a lot of personal investment, which we like to avoid. And especially in the current culture, which praises individual happiness above everything, there's a question, well, why should we invest all that effort into something that doesn't obviously benefit us in any way? As I point out, you
mentioned in your chapter that, as I would say, part of this, that the mourning, the process, it takes us outside of the world.
Yes.
It sort of poured this cloak over us, which is a sort of a shadow. It takes us away. We are not as more engaged in the world, and we're not as productive. And this is this beautiful passage from C.S. Lewis after the mourning of his wife.
It's like the sky, he says.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. So this is something that Freud captures. Both Roger and I quote Freud on this in his 1917 essay, Mourning and Melancholia. Freud thinks that the object that we lose becomes a burden when we can't engage with that object anymore, be it a person who has died or in a broader sense, as you said, someone who, we can't reach anymore, who has disappeared from our life, or perhaps a way of life that we have been used to is no longer accessible because of war, for example, as we're seeing now in Ukraine right now. For all these reasons, a certain way of living might be impossible to continue. And of course, expecting it to continue makes it hard for us to engage with the world in a meaningful way. We're constantly expecting something that we cannot get. And so Freud's solution is to bury, as it were, that object of desire, that object of unfulfilled desire, in order to be able to re-engage with the world and live a happy life. Freud is making it again about the individual. Freud understands that mourning, and this is something that, of course, is valuable in Freud. Not everything that Freud said was wrong. There's quite a lot of good things in Freud as well. So he understood that without going through the process of mourning, as Roger calls it, the work of mourning, it is true we won't be able to re-engage with the world meaningfully. There's some process that we have to go through, but the justification for undertaking that work, and it is hard labor, as justification of it, Freud suggests personal happiness, liberation from the burden that the lost object poses, in order to become the carefree individual that we supposedly were before the loss occurred as well. The truth is, of course, we were not a carefree individual. We were bound up in, obligations and meanings that were connected to things outside of ourselves. And this is something, as we recognize in Sophocles' play Antigone, is what we experience when we face loss. The fact that all these commitments and obligations are very hard to reconceptualize and re-engage with. And the process of mourning, in my view, is a way of giving us an opportunity to do this. So that's the sort of background from which my personal engagement with the thought or with the issue of mourning came. That's why I wanted to organize the colloquium. And it was a big success. The society got a lot of letters about how the topic touched people who were present at the colloquium. It was filmed, so people also sent emails about the particular talks that they were able to see.
A wonderful moment when academia can meet with the outside world.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually address the real problems which are there and not bore everyone to death.
Yeah, absolutely.
And answer certain topics which are important, because every one of us in our adult life will or had or is going to experience loss and mourning, and either we get rid of it as quickly as Freud, just liberate ourselves from it and forget it, which I think is sort of impossible. And as you mentioned in your chapter, it is also this heaviness, the meaning of a relationship which we had with this person and love for the person, which we want to somehow express in this process of mourning as well. I might think that with a certain losses, then you sort of reshape your personality, and you never totally get away. You just become a different person with this element of being connected to someone who is dead. I would say that if you're a mother who loses a child, you never stop being a mother to this child anymore. You're just a mother to a child who passed away. And this is a different identity which you suddenly get.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think in the background of this kind of instrumental approach to mourning, that this is a process that we need to go through, like going to the gym in order to lose some belly fat and be the best self. People are approaching, or in the sort of Freudian culture, or the culture that in psychology Freud has largely inspired. Not only Freud, but largely Freud has inspired. The idea is similar. We go through the process of mourning, which is a sort of, a necessary task that we have to undergo to become our best selves again.
Active and very productive.
That's right. Active and very productive.
When I see it right now, it's like the American culture, which we are all somehow in. Obviously, because of the geopolitical situation which we are in, is taking us through. And so it incorporates Freud in the system. It's in this way.
It's not only American culture. I would say it's Western culture more broadly. Freud was not an American.
No, of course.
And his ideas are as alive in continental Europe as they are in America, of course. But I think the underlying notion that there is this stable individual core that we have, that we always need to just think in terms of having the best of that manifest, is a bit of an illusion. I think there's as much transformation in our life as there is stability. And I think the little stability that we have in our life, in fact, largely comes from others rather than from ourselves. We're group animals, rather than, individual animals.
This is this very interesting thought, which which is actually Jordan Peterson's thought, that we put away the saneness, or just being sane, is sort of we give the burden of like putting back in shape for the others, because we live in certain groups. So then the other people are giving us signals when we lose track a little bit too much.
Well, this is originally Hegel's thought, of course, in the fantastic master and slave dialectic part of his phenomenology of
just
spirit.
put it more in modern world. Who makes it right now a little more popular was Peterson in his book. But
I completely agree with the thought. I think that's a thought even the Hegelians now kind of disavow in the name of this idea of individuality or authenticity or personal uniqueness. But Hegel recognized that we understand ourselves to be who we are only when we see what we look like in the other person's eyes. And so if the other person is not there, if we lose the other person, someone extremely important for us or meaningful in our lives, might also be a person who we've never met, but who, for example, we read, an author, and so on, we lose a part of ourselves. We can no longer recognize ourselves. We depend on others and, the way that they're seeing us, the way that they look at us and the way they look at the world and make us look at the world. That's much more important to our identity than we're currently willing to accept. And so I think that's at the core of the idea of how we approach loss and what the process of mourning entails. I think, as you very rightly pointed out at the start of our conversation today, that loss and mourning are phenomena that are much broader than just the death of someone close. It's, passing away of opportunities that we have of engaging with the world that are connected to ways of being that, for example, are represented by institutions and countries. And in a way, I think all of our culture is a sort of coming to terms with the loss of something, but incorporating that loss in the way that we currently live. I think communities can mourn in this way as well and learn from the past and incorporate elements of the past, despite the fact that large parts of the past are no longer retrievable and no longer livable.
When you are saying this right now, because right now we have this refugees crisis from Ukraine a lot, and we see we are sort of the backstage of war, ongoing war, which happening right now. Even when we sort of want to go back to normality, this normality is broken with refugees which are here, and with I had a chance to meet a lot of refugees from Ukraine, and they are in the same process of mourning, even though when they didn't lose people as relatives, or they were able to flee away, or their fathers are still fighting there in Ukraine. But this apathia which comes is the same apathia which comes after is happening at the funeral. There's the same sort of that they lost a home, they lost some sort of life and the world, which is away there, and then now they need to find themselves in the new form of a world. But I do think it's going to somehow occur all of us, because with I would say with the aggression of Ukraine over Russia over Ukraine, we are experiencing the loss of certain stability of the world which we experienced before, and it's going to affect the part of the Western world as well, maybe less directly than Ukraine itself, but we'll see the part of it. Definitely American soldiers which are on the border of Poland, they are experiencing already something.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, Ukrainians as well, a colossal transformation of a whole way of life. You might say the loss of a sense of innocence and ability to be carefree about the future.
Absolutely. And
Suddenly from a kind of a stable environment, you realize you're in a world where you might die any day. This is what a friend of mine who, at the beginning of the war, who I know from Oxford, Rostislav, at the beginning of the war, he lived in Lviv. I'm not sure where he is now, but he wrote to me not so long ago, referring to the writing that I have done on mourning, and that's what he said. That in his current situation, the thing that he feels he has lost is the sort of sense of stability of the world, where now suddenly he finds himself in a situation where he might die any day. And it's impossible now to come back to the former way of life, even when the war is going to be over. You're never going to find yourself in the life that you had before that sense of having, being able to die any day, or being under threat of dying any day brings.
I fully agree. And then comes to what you finished your essay with, is the development of culture, and in this case, develop new culture, which the Western world will have this sort of combination also of to add the Ukrainian culture in it. But Ukraine itself is creating their own culture through the process of mourning over the stability and the life which ended with this war. But I do hope at least that in this as a process, a new culture of a new nation of Ukrainians will be born on this war.
Absolutely. One thing that we've definitely seen is a great unification of Ukraine. Not many people remember that, before the war, before the first phase of the war, which was of course,
2015.
2015, correct. Ukraine was very fragmented, and there were internal tensions that run quite deep. And since the war has occurred, there was a great spiritual unification in Ukraine, which seems like something that has a potential to last. And I think that is a product of addressing something that Ukraine has lost inevitably, and trying to keep what is still possible to keep from Ukrainian identity. So the Ukrainians, I think, realize that they're not going to survive. They're not going to be able to continue if they, continue as factions.
But coming back to the topic of mourning and this, that going through this process of and putting, lifting the weight of overcoming, sort of, but I don't know, of incorporating this loss in our lives, very often can flourish in some sort of new identity and new development of culture, of products of culture, or understanding ourselves and others better in this way that at least that's what you write in your essay.
Yes, I think in a way, to put it slightly provocatively, the process of mourning, in my view, is not so much coming to terms with death, but overcoming it. That's the whole point of being able to incorporate as part of your life, part of the life that is gone, or part of the way of life that is gone, or part of the value that we have lost. Giving it another life, or prolonging its life and existence. So that's true for persons, but that's true for more abstract things, like institutions and values and so on. So it's overcoming the destruction that we face, rather than coming to terms with it. Whereas the Freudian view, or neo-Freudian view, is that destruction has happened and there's nothing to pick up, and deluding ourselves to the contrary will only hold us back from entering the brave new world where the old values are no more. And I think that's wrong, in the sense that there is no brave new world. It's an illusion that we're creating in order to feel better. but we're still in the same world, and
with the same values.
With the same values, that's right. And it's only a question of whether we're able to preserve them or not.
And I would say it's a perfect way to wrap up this episode, because also Common Sense Generation and this platform is, I do hope, a way of preserving certain values and putting them outside for the new world. So once again, Mikołaj Sławkowski-Rode, thank you very much for being our guest. And to all of you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation, thank you very much for watching this show. Go and definitely check out the book, The Meaning of Mourning, which we have here, and check what the Humane Philosophy Society is doing. And well, stay tuned. And again, I thank Polish National Foundation for making this podcast possible. Stay tuned.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
This is Common Sense Generation.